Hello everybody, this is Gregory, 5-Minute Catholic Apologetics and Living, where 5 minutes of your time may get you to the divine. Today we're going to talk about how I think America is in a collective depression and how religion can help with that. Now before we begin, let's start with a prayer. Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritui Sancti, Amen. Gloria et Patri Filii et Spiritui Sancto, secutor in principio et nunc et semper et saecula saeculorum. Amen. Why do I think America is in a collective depression? Well, I look at 3 or 4 indicators. 1, morbid obesity. 70% of Americans are overweight, meaning that they are at least 20% above their BMI. Now, the BMI is not a perfect indicator of healthy weight, but is somewhat of an indicator. So that means you're at least 20 pounds overweight, and then 40% of Americans are obese, meaning more than 20% overweight. And I talk about on my separate YouTube channel how I lost over 100 pounds and I've kept it for 30 plus years. I talk about kind of like why the reasons why obesity is so pervasive. And it's numbing the pain, it's a lot of childhood trauma and so forth. We're not going to talk about it here, but clearly America is getting more overweight and overweight and overweight. And yes, we can blame like the obesogens, we can blame monosodium glutamate, we can blame bigger portions, but ultimately you look at a dog. My dog, I'm hungry. He goes, eats a little until he's no longer hungry, then he stops eating. He doesn't eat till he is about to throw up. And typically obesity is some sort of disordered relationship that you have with food. Because if you had an ordered relationship with food, you wouldn't be overweight in the first place. But to get to this realization, lots of times there's a lot of cognitive dissonance that we have. And I talk about a lot over at that channel. But either way, that's not here, they're here. Obesity is a major problem. We're the most overweight we've ever been in human history. People are turning to food to numb the pain. Drinking, alcohol. I mean, it is a vice that is so accepted. I know people in my life that are driven crazy by the fact that Catholic parishes will serve alcohol. Knights of Columbus will serve alcohol. There's a parish festival, they'll serve alcohol. There's retreat centers that will have alcohol. And, from my perspective, it's a little different. But if you're a convert, especially if you're a convert from maybe the denominations that look at alcohol as a complete vice, I could see it from an outsider's perspective. like maybe we shouldn't be contributing to this vice. Now, again, drunkenness is a sin. Drinking's not a sin. But either way, Americans are turning to the booze. The consumption of alcohol is just egregiously high right now. Recreational drugs, same thing. I mean, now this has been normalized like so many of these other things. 30, 40 years ago, doing drugs there was still kind of a stigma to it, kind of like illegitimacy rates. And now, smoking pot's legal in so many states, so many countries, and it's so in the norm. In Hollywood, you see movies where people are getting high on psychedelic drugs and so forth. It's not even that big of a deal. So you see that number going up as well. So I think you look at these things and it's not surprisingly, and I'm not saying correlation causation, but all these things would suggest that we're trying to check out. We're trying to check out. We're dealing with depression. Another thing is the amount of psychiatric drugs that are being prescribed is obscenely high. People are on antidepressants, SSRIs, whichever ones you want to talk about. There's different categories. A lot of people are on anxiety drugs, the anxiolytics, the benzodiazepines. A lot of people are on psychiatric drugs. Why are they on psychiatric drugs? So you kind of look at this composite that we're all struggling, either with weight, with alcohol dependence. If you look at the definition by the government, alcohol dependence for a man is having 14 drinks or more a week, and for women it's 10, because women are smaller typically. So you look at these criterias, we're on the roof. I mean, how many people are having more than 14 servings of alcohol a week? This is pretty common. So if you look at all these kind of indicators, it suggests to me that America's depressed. We're depressed. Yeah, you can say it's the inflation. Maybe you're watching, and I've talked about this before in a past episode, just stick to Catholic content. Don't be watching the nightly news. Don't be watching the national news. Don't be watching Fox News or MSNBC, because again, these entities only care about the ratings. And so many people get so apoplectic when they're watching this, either from the left or the right, and just get you in such a tizzy on things that you really can't control. It's kind of the same thing I talk about with whatever's going on in Rome. You can't affect change, just focus on your own spirituality. But you see that Americans aren't doing well right now. And you look at all these kind of like anecdotal observations, the aforementioned I've talked about, the amount of psychiatric drugs, alcohol, obesity, all these things would suggest that we're all stressed and trying to numb some sort of pain. And sadly, the Christianity is in decline. And I think that a couple of things. When you take God out of your life, you're going to fill it with another ism. And you see it with either militant feminism, militant environmentalism. It could be militant CrossFitism. You're a workout junkie. We are wired to have a connection with the divine. And when you deny that or impede that connection, you're just going to fill it with another religion. And of course, sometimes it's just militant atheism. But you're going to fill it with something else. And I think this just does such a disservice to the person, because having a relationship with Christ, and I'll say even with the Protestants, having their relationship with Christ, but certainly from the Catholic perspective, having the Eucharist, having all the things that we have at our disposal helps. It helps when you have a good faith. It helps when you go through times in your life that are stressful. It helps that you can go through times in your life where there is suffering and sorrowful. We're all going to likely die from the last disease that we get. We're all going to have, if you haven't already had it, misfortune, and horrible misfortune can happen. And when you have God in your life, especially if you have an idea of kind of like redemptive suffering, and you have the idea of why God allows suffering, I think it gives you perspective, and I think it helps you. So I think when Americans are in this collective depression, and you also have this higher rate of agnosticism, atheism, we've talked about it recently in the nones, the number of nones in America that is going up, non-affiliated, spiritual but religious types. I don't think it's that surprising. I think that, and it's not to say, look, in the 1840s when Alexis de Tocqueville came, and he observed what makes America great, which is essentially individualism and religion and so forth. It's not like there wasn't drinking back in the 1840s. Of course there was. There's been drinking of fermented drinks forever, right? But I think it was just a different time. And I think as a whole, the closer relationship you have with Christ and with prayer and understanding the purpose of prayer. The purpose of prayer is not to convince God. God's omniscient. God already knows exactly what's going to happen to us. The job of prayer is to make ourselves more humble, to make us better people. And ultimately, it's to, like the Lord's Prayer says, not to try to change God's will to our own, but submit to God's will. And the two best examples of that, as I've talked about before, is Mary's fiat. I'm the handmaid of the Lord, be it done to me according to thy word. And then Christ in the garden. I don't want to take this cup, but if this is your will, so it be. And that's kind of the mindset that we need to have with everything when it comes to prayer, when it comes to redemptive suffering, is I don't know what's best for me. Clearly you do. So you think of the divine mercy image. Jesus, I trust in you. I trust in you when I go through this sadness, when I go through this sorrow. I trust in you that something good will come out of it. Whether it be you will be a better person later on, or greatness will come from this misfortune, or maybe you're redirecting for the souls in purgatory and helping all these souls in purgatory, or it's your so to speak temporal purgatory that you're going through that's going to help you not have to go through legitimate purgatory when you die. Who knows what it is? We don't know God's will. We don't know. But when it comes to this collective depression that I think we're in, I think that a lot of Americans are sorely not using this tool at their disposal, which is religion, which is our faith. Because our faith has guided us. Our faith has guided our ancestors. Think how bad things were 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, where half of your kids are going to die from some disease, where you have war and pestilence and drought and all these things that we can't even fathom, right, in our cushy lives. But they had their faith. Their faith got them through it. So it's not surprisingly, as people are choosing to forsake the faith of their forefathers. I have an early episode here. Essentially, we're urinating on our ancestors who martyred themselves for their faith, who went to the grave fighting for their faith in religious wars or in persecutions, so they could pass it on to their kids and their kids and their kids and eventually to us. And now we are just urinating on their graves by choosing, I know better, right? I know better. I'm an atheist. I know better. And we're choosing to turn on our ancestors because of intellectual hubris. And so it's not surprising that you see this kind of like this rise of whatever, materialism, postmodernist thinking, secular materialism, that there's this higher rate then of what? Obesity, alcohol consumption, psychiatric drug consumption, and so forth. And I don't think that that's a coincidence. And I do think if more people turned back to Christ, and this is one of the things I pray for every day, where we all turn back. I've talked about in that episode, like one of my nightly prayers when I'm trying to go to sleep is just imagine like this gigantic pasture and everyone's just on their knees praying, and there's just this gigantic cross, and everyone is just humbly on their knees. Because remember, the church is not a museum of saints, it's a hospital of sinners of you, sinners of me, and we have to be humble and contrite. And I just feel like if America turned back to God more, you would also, the benefits would be we'd have a better America, I think. But one of the other ancillary benefits is that you would see a lot of these social ills like alcohol, the illegitimacy rates, the rise of the welfare state because of it, all these broken families, the drug use, the obesity. I think you would see a lot of these abate. I could be wrong. Guys, post in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Hit the notification, subscribe, and share button. Until next time, take care. God bless and pray.